Somewhere in a government building right now, someone is signing a piece of paper that commits people who haven't been born yet to pay for something they'll never see, never use, and never agreed to. It happens every single day, in every major country on Earth, and almost nobody notices. We call it a bond auction. Our grandchildren will call it a bill. By the end of 2025, the world owed $348 trillion, the largest one-year jump in borrowing since the pandemic, and more than 3 times the size of everything the entire planet produces in a year. This isn't a story about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a story about a 5,000-year-old habit that keeps ending the same way, and a civilization that keeps convincing itself this time is different. Long before coins existed, debt was already breaking empires. In Rome, by the 3rd century AD, the silver denarius, once a trusted coin, nearly pure in metal, had been quietly diluted, generation after generation, until it contained barely 5% silver. Emperors weren't chemists. They were desperate borrowers, and shaving the coinage was the easiest way to pay soldiers and fund wars without raising taxes anyone could see. The public didn't vote on it. They simply woke up one day to find their savings bought less bread. That's the oldest trick in finance. You don't have to steal from people directly. If you can, just quietly shrink what their money is worth. Rome didn't collapse because barbarians were strong. It cracked because the value underneath, its economy, had been hollowed out for 200 years first. Fast forward to 18th century France. By 1788, the French crown was spending nearly half its entire budget just paying interest on debts, run-up fighting wars, including, ironically, the one that helped America win its independence. King Louis XVI's finance ministers tried everything: new taxes, austerity, borrowing more to cover the interest on the last loan. Nothing worked because the nobility and the church were exempt from taxation, leaving the burden on peasants who had nothing left to give. The debt crisis didn't just weaken the monarchy, it forced the king to call the Estates General. For the first time in over a century, the meeting that spiraled directly into the French Revolution. A finance problem became a guillotine. That's the part textbooks skip. The revolution wasn't only about liberty and bread. It was, underneath everything, an unpaid invoice. The Ottoman Empire offers an even stranger warning. By the Ibad Teeling S, the empire had borrowed so heavily from European banks to modernize its army and build palaces that half its government. Revenue went straight to foreign creditors. In 1875, the Sultan simply announced the empire could no longer pay. European powers responded by creating something extraordinary. The Ottoman Public Debt Administration, a foreign-run agency that took direct control of Ottoman tax collection to guarantee bondholders got paid first. Think about what that means. A sovereign empire effectively handed the keys to its own treasury to its lenders. Debt didn't just cost money. It cost sovereignty. That pattern would repeat a century later, almost note for note, in Greece. The 20th century didn't invent excessive debt. It invented infinite debt. When the United States severed the dollar's last tie to gold in August 1971, it removed the final physical limit on how much money could be created. Before that moment, a government wanting to print more currency eventually ran into a wall. Not enough gold in the vault. After 1971, the wall was gone. Debt could now be created with a keystroke, backed by nothing but confidence. This is the quiet hinge point almost nobody learns about in school. Every credit card swipe, every mortgage, every $1 trillion stimulus package since then has operated inside a system with no anchor at all. Just trust, and the assumption that tomorrow's economy will be big, enough to cover today's borrowing. By 2008, that trust was tested directly. American banks had built a financial pyramid out of mortgages bundled, resold, insured, and leveraged so many times. Over that, regulators themselves couldn't map who owed what to whom. When home prices dipped, the entire structure seized. Governments worldwide injected trillions to stop a total collapse. And it worked, but it also taught every major economy a dangerous lesson. When debt gets big enough, it becomes too risky to let fail. So it simply gets absorbed by the public instead. That lesson has never been unlearned. Since 2008, global borrowing hasn't slowed, it has accelerated. Because the cost of rescue was never allowed to be a lesson in restraint. Here's where we stand right now. Global debt hit that record $348 trillion figure by the end of 2025. According to the Institute of International Finance, roughly 300% of everything the world economy produces in a year. The United States alone crossed $1.5 trillion in national debt by August 2026, meaning every citizen's theoretical share is now well over $100,000. Interest payments on that debt already consume a bigger slice of the federal budget than the entire national defense budget did a generation ago. And a new driver has entered the picture that didn't exist in previous debt cycles: artificial intelligence infrastructure. Tech giants are now issuing enormous volumes of corporate bonds, some through off-balance sheet vehicles to finance data centers, a build-out projected to require trillions of dollars globally by 2030. It's the same instinct as ancient Rome shaving its coins, or 1780s France borrowing for war. Spend now, against a future that's assumed, not guaranteed. History only ever offers 3 exits from a debt mountain this size, and every civilization we've discussed already tried one. Door 1. Inflate it away. Shrink the value of the currency so the debt becomes easier to repay in real terms. Rome's silver trick, just modernized. Door 2. Restructure. Sit down with creditors and negotiate. Smaller payments, what the Ottomans were forced into, and what Greece endured in the 2010s, and what Sri Lanka went through after its 2022 default. Door 3. Default outright. Simply stop paying and accept the consequences: market exile, currency collapse, decades of rebuilding trust, as Argentina has experienced multiple times. No empire in 5,000 years has found a fourth door. Maybe the deepest truth about debt isn't economic at all. It's that every generation seems to believe it's the exception. The one civilization clever enough to borrow without consequence, disciplined enough to grow faster than its obligations, lucky enough to dodge the reckoning that swallowed Rome, swallowed the Ottomans, swallowed every empire that ever mistook borrowed time for owned time. But debt was never actually about money. It was always about time, a claim one generation stakes on the labor of the next. Whether that generation consents or not, the Roman farmer paying debased coins for bread, the French peasant taxed to fund a war he never chose, the young worker today whose future earnings are already quietly promised to bondholders he'll never meet. They're all living the same story in different costumes. The mountain doesn't care how advanced we've become. It never has. The only real question left is whether we face it with our eyes open, or whether, like every civilization before us, we wait for the invoice to arrive